Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. As you can tell by the title, I'm doing a slightly different review today. I'm actually going to be comparing two different palettes. So for this comparison, the high-end palette I'll be comparing is the Jeffree Star Blue Blood palette, and the drugstore comparison is the Makeup Revolution Forever Flawless Ice palette. And I'm really interested to see actually how the two palettes compare. I'll be doing a look with each palette, showing you some swatches, and then giving you my final thoughts on them both. I thought that the easiest way to compare these two palettes would be to create two as identical as possible eyeshadow looks. So I'm going to be doing one eye with entirely Blue Blood and one eye entirely with the Makeup Revolution Forever Flawless Ice palette. I have already to myself swatched the shades to try and get the best matches to hopefully get the looks looking as similar as possible. I'm going to be starting with quite a light base shade, and from the Makeup Revolution palette I'm going to be using shade Drench, and this looks kind of like a pale mint green. So this eye is going to be entirely with the Revolution palette and the other eye is going to be entirely with the Blue Blood palette. So definitely good pigmentation so far. Definitely a really nice kind of minty greeny blue. Once I have done both the looks, I will be swatching all of the shades and giving my final thoughts on the comparison between the two palettes. This is a really lovely base shade. Nice and light. Interested to see how it compares with the Blue Blood shade. It's definitely gone on really well, really good pigmentation, really easy to apply. I'm just going to grab my Blue Blood palette and I'll do the equivalent shade on this eye. I thought that the most equivalent shade was Mint Tea. I would say this is slightly lighter. Obviously I'm not expecting both eyes to be identical, it's just going to be as close as possible. This has definitely got a more blue tinge compared to the shade in the Revolution palette. Applying really well. I don't feel like I need to get loads and loads and loads on the brush. Again, super pigmented, which I would hope for the price difference would be. I would say that these two shades actually look more similar in the palettes than they do actually now they're on my eye. This one's definitely a bit greenier and this one's definitely far more blue. I don't know whether the difference is as obvious on the camera, but so far both performing excellently. Now that I've got the base done on both eyes, I'm going to be moving in with the second shade and I'm going to be focusing on the outer part of my eye, and I'm going for shade Melt, which is this teal greeny blue. And again, it was one of the shades that had a kind of similar match to the Blue Blood palette. Again, it's gone onto the brush really nicely. I have just gone for this angled brush. Got a small amount of fallout there. I don't know how visible again it is on the camera, but I can see it, but nothing to be concerned about. Just pop down a bit of this shade. I'm going to take a slightly bigger brush just to get it blended out. I would say it's not as dark teal as it does look in the palette, so maybe the pigmentation isn't 100%, but it's definitely gone onto my skin really nicely and definitely blending really nicely with the first shade. But I think if I wanted to get it as dark as it looks in the palette, I probably would have to apply a few layers of this shade. I'm just going to grab Blue Blood and have a look at the other eye. I think shade Flourishing probably is going to be the closest to shade Melt, and I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit concerned because I know that this colour is actually really teal and really pigmented, but it was the only one that bared any similarity to Melt. I'm going to grab my angled brush. Again, just pop a little bit of this shade down and then I'm going to grab the bigger brush again and get it blended out. This is so pigmented. Definitely so easy to blend. Actually looking pretty similar so far. I think the colour payoff is definitely better in this palette than the Makeup Revolution one, but both are doing excellently. Definitely looking very similar so far, and I'm really happy with how both palettes are doing at the moment. Next, I'm going to be doing the inner part of my eyelid, and this is going to be a shimmer shade, and from the Revolution palette I'm going to be using shade Icicle. Again, it's going onto the brush really well. Giving me pretty decent colour payoff so far. This is a lovely shade, a lovely blue shimmer. This definitely looks like a really bright blue in the palette, but on the eye, from what I can see, it doesn't look too dissimilar to shade Melt, apart from that it's a shimmer. But certainly blending well, got no complaints with it. I'll bring this out about 2/3 of the way across my eye, and I'll just get the other one done. The equivalent shade in Blue Blood I'm going for is Entitled. I don't know if these are going to be 100% match, but definitely were the most similar. This already feels much more buttery than shade Icicle did. So this shimmer is definitely slightly more greeny blue, but I wouldn't say massively dissimilar. Don't forget, I will be swatching all of the shades side by side once I have finished both eyes. I think so far I've got two pretty even looking eyes, even though it's two different palettes. For the under of this eye, I'm going to be using shade Freeze, which is just like a standard sky blue shade. Again, good pigmentation, definitely applying very nicely. And just bring it all the way up, and then I'll just get another blend done on the top bit. Bring it all the way to the inner corner. The corresponding shade in Blue Blood is very aptly named Blue Blood. And this is also just a sky blue. I'm just going to do exactly the same, just pop it from the outer corner to the inner corner. This is definitely coming out as a lighter blue. I would say actually that this one on the eye looks exactly as it does in the palette, but the other shade from the Forever Flawless Ice palette actually has come out with more of a greeny tinge on the eye compared to in the palette. So that's one thing I've noticed. Last but not least, for the eyeshadow, I'm just going to highlight my brow bone, and from the Makeup Revolution palette, I'm going to be using shade Cool, which is this white shimmer. I thought it was the most apt to use as a highlight shade. So just a nice little sparkle, definitely nice shade. Now I have managed to get some onto the brush. It might just be because it's white and it's a very similar colour to the brush, but definitely going onto the skin very nicely and giving me a really nice highlight. The equivalent in the Blue Blood palette is this first shade here. This is shade Cullinan. This is definitely one of my favourite highlight shades out of all of my palettes. This goes onto the brush really nicely. There's actually loads on there. Again, another really lovely buttery shimmer. Well, there we are so far, and I think probably with the exception of the under eye shade, the top bit actually looks really similar. I'm really impressed. I wouldn't have thought that a £12 palette compared to a £52 palette would have such similar shade colours. All that's left is to do my eyeliner and my mascara. I've just got a black Wet n Wild pencil, and I've got the Maybelline Sky High Lash Sensational mascara. Actually the first time using that mascara, so that's also very exciting. And there's both eyes completed now, and I think actually they look really similar. I'm really impressed actually at how well the shades go. As I said, apart from the under eye shade being not the closest of matches, the rest of it actually is pretty good. I would say that the Makeup Revolution palette so far has been a really good dupe of the Jeffree Star Blue Blood palette. I'll just give a close up just to get obviously a better look at it. So this one is the eye with Blue Blood, and this was the Makeup Revolution Forever Flawless Ice palette. The only really obvious thing I noticed was that the shades in the Blue Blood palette were a bit darker. I don't know if it's just because they're darker in general or because they were more pigmented. What I'll do now is I'm going to swatch all of the shades, and then I'll give my final kind of thoughts and review on the two palettes. Well, these are the first four shades that have somewhat direct matches. So the top of each double of shades is from the Blue Blood palette, and the second of each is from the Makeup Revolution Forever Flawless Ice palette. So first up we've got Cullinan, and then we've got Cool. So this was the highlight shade that I used. Underneath that we've got Mintea, and then we've got Drench. Next up we've got Crystal Flesh and Immerse, which are both kind of goldy bronzy shimmer shades. And last two we've got I'm Cold and Crystal. And to be fair, looking pretty similar, obviously not, you know, 100% dupes. So this is the next lot of swatches. So starting at the top, this is shade Blue Blood and this is shade Free. So they're the ones I used for the under eye that weren't too similar, but similar enough. Underneath that, this is Deceased and this is Ocean. Underneath that, we've got a lovely shimmer blue. This is Ice Tray and this is definitely much darker here, but was the closest match in terms of the shimmer shades. This is shade Titanic. Underneath that is Blue Monday and underneath that is Iceberg, and then we've got Flourishing and we've got Melt, which definitely look really similar in the swatches. I will say the only thing with the swatches is I am finding with the Makeup Revolution palette I'm having to go in quite a lot with my finger and doing, you know, more than one layer of swatch, whereas with the Blue Blood palette it's just a one layer and I'm still getting a really pigmented effect. So the next lot of swatches, the first couple of shades are quite difficult to see, but the first one is very similar to my skin tone. This is from Blue Blood palette and this is Wealthy, and then this is Frostbite from the Makeup Revolution palette. Underneath that is a mid-tone brown and this one is Celebrity Skin, and underneath that is Climate. Then there's two more shades I used in this look. So this was Entitled and this one was Icicle. Underneath that, this is Ocean Ice and this is Arctic. And then right at the bottom, this is Undertaker and this is H2O. Now the final lot of swatches after this are ones that didn't have a direct match, but I just wanted to show you the swatches just to get a feeling for the variety of the shades. And these are the last swatches. The top four are all from the Blue Blood palette and the bottom four are all from the Makeup Revolution palette. So starting at the top here, this is shade Priceless. This pink shade here is Untouchable, and then we've got two more darker mattes. This is Power and this is Cremated. And then from the other palette here we've got Break, we've got a lovely bronze shimmer. This is Glass, a lovely silver shimmer. It's probably my favourite shade in the entire palette actually. This is Glacier, and underneath that is Icy. So I do like that there are shades that are, you know, not in both palettes. I think it definitely makes both palettes more versatile, and I would be quite disappointed if all 18 shades were exactly the same. So definitely happy to have both of these in my collection. Both palettes definitely are excellent, and starting off with Blue Blood, so that will set you back £52 in comparison to the Makeup Revolution palette, which will set you back £12. Both palettes come with 18 shades. This is the Ice palette, so it's got a metal tin, very cute packaging, definitely. Pan size is just standard for the Makeup Revolution Forever Flawless range. Of course, the Blue Blood palette is much bigger, got this fancy looking clasp. Pan sizes are much larger. So packaging wise, I would say that Blue Blood wins, although in terms of being, you know, transportable, easy to take away with you, the Makeup Revolution palette definitely wins for that. Pigmentation, both were great, but I will have to say that the Blue Blood palette was far more pigmented. It was easier to blend, although both were easy to blend. I think the shade range in both is excellent, and to be honest, both palettes actually performed really, really well. And I think if you didn't have the budget to splash out over £50 on a palette, but you wanted, you know, a really good range of blues mixed in with some more neutral tones, I would definitely recommend going for the Ice palette from Makeup Revolution because it is brilliant. But I think overall, my personal winner does have to be the Jeffree Star Blue Blood palette. The formulas are amazing, the shades are amazing, and it's one of my favourite palettes that I own. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you again in my next video.